The Laura Ingraham Show.
Joining us now is Vice President-elect. I love saying that, but I can't wait to say just Vice President. Mike Pence, who I ran into just, a few minutes ago down at Fox and Friends, and I forced him to take a selfie with me, and the selfie came out terrible, so I'm not posting it. And he joins us now. I keep saying Governor, I keep saying Mike, because I've known you for so long. Vice President-elect Pence, how are you? Merry Christmas.
I'm great, Laura, and it was great to see you at the Fox studios this morning. I'm always happy to be your warm-up act.
Oh, yeah, right. Very funny. I kept saying, who's bumped me? I usually go on at 8:05 and was huffing around. I said, it better be Pence. And then I walked in, and I saw all these Secret Service folks, and I said, gosh, what's the problem? I mean, am I that much of a threat? So it's craziness. So tell us, Vice President-elect, about this intrigue about Secretary of State. I can't tell you how many emails and texts and so forth I've gotten from my listeners and supporters who are concerned that either Huntsman or Romney is at the front of the pack. What can you tell us?
Well, what I can tell you is that from literally the Wednesday morning after this election was called, our president-elect has been assembling a cabinet at a historic pace. It really has been inspiring to watch it come together. I saw an account just the other day that this cabinet has come together more quickly than any cabinet by any administration over the last 40 years, and that's a testament to the president-elect's energy and the fact that he is driving forward to bring the very best and brightest to every task. With regard to Secretary of State, I can tell you that no decision has been made, that he is going to continue to meet with men and women of extraordinary caliber, diverse backgrounds, and I'm just absolutely convinced that our president-elect is in that position and in every position is going to choose the best person to move his agenda forward. And I think that's what I hear in every one of these interviews. And, I've been asked to chair the transition, so it's my job to put people in front of him from across the country, and the president-elect makes those decisions. But at the end of the day, the focus is who would be best able to advance the agenda to make America great again, make America strong, at home and abroad, make America safe again.
But Vice President-elect Pence, isn't it also the case that
that's going to continue to drive all the decisions?
Right, but that you need somebody in that position of Secretary of State who is completely in sync with your worldview, your agenda. And I look back at some of the things Huntsman has said, and he's a very nice man. I say he's very smart. I mean, obviously he's no dummy. He speaks fluent Mandarin. He said back in 2009, I have enormous regard for your experience, sense of history, and brilliant analysis of world events. Talking about Barack Obama and about Hillary Clinton, said she's won the hearts and minds of the State Department bureaucracy, no easy task, saying her charisma could actually outpace that of her husband. It just doesn't seem like a Donald Trump type of pick to me.
Well, I'm not at liberty to talk about the metes and bounds of the list, obviously, but what I can assure all of your listeners around the country and people that are enthusiastic and inspired by the leadership and vision of Donald Trump is that everybody around him knows that the people that are signing up and the people that are going to be selected are going to be advancing his agenda, and it's just been remarkable to see. The way that he goes about these interviews, his decisiveness, and it just gives me great confidence that we are going to be ready on day one to turn this country around at home, to get the economy rolling again, to deal with and end illegal immigration once and for all, and to have America standing tall in the world again.
Vice President-elect Pence, let's talk about the reaction to this acceptance of the Taiwanese leader's call last week. To me, it's much ado about nothing. This is what Josh Earnest, press secretary for Barack Obama, said yesterday.
I think it's hard to determine exactly what the aim was of the president-elect. I know both the vice president-elect and his campaign manager were when asked about this over the weekend, indicated that these were courtesy calls, or that this was a courtesy call, and the president-elect was merely returning that call. The Washington Post today tells a different story, with some Trump aides indicating that this was a long-planned call, and that this is part of a broader strategic effort. It's unclear exactly what the strategic effort is, what the aim of the strategic effort is, and it's unclear exactly what potential benefit could be experienced by the United States, China, or Taiwan.
His point is that there was mixed messages sent for the reason for the call, you and Kellyanne saying one thing and Donald Trump tweeting out something different. What was the purpose of taking this call, and does this somehow hurt our standing going forward in the region?
Well, I really do think it's been a little bit of a tempest in a teapot. It is remarkable to me that President Obama can reach out to the now deceased murdering dictator of Cuba and be hailed as a hero, and Donald Trump accepts a congratulatory call from the democratically elected leader of Taiwan, and it becomes a source of great concern and consternation. Look, this was a congratulatory outreach from Taiwan. The president-elect took the call with the full knowledge of our One China policy and the issues surrounding our relationship with Taiwan and with China, and he accepted it for that reason. He's actually spoken to more than 50 world leaders. I've spoken to a couple of dozen on his behalf, including earlier today. And I can tell you that any issues in our relationship with China, and they are many, and the president-elect tweeted about several of those. Those will all wait till after January 20th, whether it be North Korea, or the South China Sea, or our trade relationship. But this was part and parcel of an effort that you're seeing the president-elect make to simply begin to establish relationships with leaders around the world, and reflect the kind of courtesy that an engagement that the American people would expect from an incoming president.
One thing that George Washington, of course, our founding father, our first president, said, and I was thinking about the way we're proceeding on this issue, and he said, harmony, liberal intercourse with all nations are recommended by policy, humanity, and interest. But even our commercial policy should hold an equal and impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences, consulting the natural course of things. He goes on to say, there can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. It is an illusion which experience must cure, which a just pride ought to discard. So he understood that the trade was a really important part of our foreign policy dealings, Vice President-elect Pence, that trade and our military power, our economic might, that all is intermingled in America's standing. That's and projecting right. America's standing and influence around the world. And from everything I'm seeing, that's what President-elect Trump understands full well about our relationship. I'm just talking about vis-a-vis China now.
Yeah, I think that's especially well said, and an inspiring quote from our first president. I think what is so refreshing about our president-elect is that he is determined to re-engage the world diplomatically and economically, but to do it on terms that put America first, put American workers and American jobs first. And those are precisely the debates, whether it be with Mexico and NAFTA, whether it be with nations in the Asian Pacific Rim or beyond, that the American people can anticipate that President-elect will advance. But there'll be a strong foreign policy, there'll be strong economic policy, but it'll put America first. And I think that is a large reason why he won the historic victory that he won on November the 8th. 30 out of 50 states, more counties won than any Republican candidate since Ronald Reagan in 1984. The American people long for that kind of strong leadership that puts our nation's interests first, and that's exactly what they're going to get with a President Donald Trump.
I've talked to a few conservatives, writers, thinkers over the last few weeks who, after the Carrier deal, expressed great consternation that we would have a president who would intervene on behalf or intervene in a business relationship, and as he did or he seemed to have done with Carrier, saying, well, you can't pick and choose winners and losers. This is a sign of a coming autocracy, an autocratic view of government, where the government has its heavy hand on certain businesses, and the concern that some of these businesses might have some business dealings in the Trump portfolio as well, and how that will all play out. How do you tackle that? How do you deal with that? Certainly, we're not going to involve ourselves in every business arrangement from a big company's perspective, but the Carrier deal is being targeted by some of the more ideological conservatives out there.
Well, I believe in free markets. So does our president-elect. And the Carrier deal seemed to me to be it was literally case in point of the fact that tax increases, an avalanche of red tape and regulation, taxes and mandates of Obamacare, as well as ill-founded, badly negotiated trade deals, has created an environment where literally now for decades we've seen jobs leaving this country, going south of the border, going to the Asian Pacific. And what Donald Trump is committed to is working with the Congress to cut taxes across the board for every American and every American business, to roll back the avalanche of red tape, to repeal and replace Obamacare, but also to negotiate trade agreements that take away the incentive for people to stop making things here and go somewhere and make them and ship them back into the United States.
No, I understand all that, but he hasn't done that. He's not president yet, but he picked up the phone on the Carrier deal and got involved. And I know when you're governor, you decided not to really pursue some more of an aggressive position with Carrier. Is that being reported correctly?
It's actually not. We got word in February that Carrier was pulling up stakes after being in Indiana since the 1950s. And was taking all those jobs to Mexico. I met in early March with the leadership of the company, had them come to the State House, sat down with them, and I said, could we put together a package of incentives, which states do every day of the week? State incentives and local incentives are a part of economic development today, and are just very routine. I said, can we put together a package? They said, don't bother. We're gone. They said the avalanche of regulations coming out of Washington, D.C., in their case, more than 50 new regulations had been promulgated in the last 2 years that only impacted them because all their competitors were already in Mexico. They said, we don't even want to consider any proposal. It was the president-elect, 1 week after winning the election, who picked up the phone, very respectfully called the leadership of the company and said, we are going to cut taxes. We're going to repeal Obamacare. We're going to roll back regulation, and we're going to renegotiate these trade deals. And would you be willing to reconsider your decision? And thanks to his outreach, his respectful outreach to that company, they made the decision to keep more than 1,000 jobs in the United States.
I think it's a huge win
because Donald Trump was elected president of the United States.
Yeah, it's a massive win. Heaven forbid we have a president who actually advocates on behalf of the American worker. It's craziness that people are complaining about this. But this is what you guys are going to be facing over the next 4 years, and it's going to be nonstop. And are you confident, before we let you go, Vice President-elect Pence, are you confident that concerns about his business dealings, his family working or advising the administration, is going to satisfy the lawyers and even satisfy the Democrats, the critics, about any potential appearance of a conflict of interest, even if there's no legal problem with the president, but just the appearance of a conflict? Are you satisfied with what's being done?
I'm very confident that come December the 15th, our president-elect will lay out a framework for creating the proper separation from his business enterprise. Look, the American people could have chosen a career politician to be our next president. They chose an accomplished businessman who has built an extraordinary enterprise. But I can tell you, being around him virtually every day of the week, almost every hour of the day, 150% of the focus of our president-elect is on the American people and on the interests of the nation. And I know he'll have the proper separation from his business enterprises while he gives all of his attention to moving this country forward and making America great again.
Vice President-elect Mike Pence, an old friend of this program and a true patriot. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me just in the last few weeks and say just how thoroughly impressed they are with you, and just they're just so delighted that you're I keep saying you're number 2 on the ticket, but you're going to be Vice President of the United States. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Laura. Always good to be on.
All right, we'll take a break. Don't go away. These are the same liberals who were praising Obama to the hilt in 2007, 8, and 9. A man with literally no private sector experience at all, other than a brief stint in the university setting, which doesn't even count. A community organizer becomes the commander-in-chief, and they had no problem with that. But Ben Carson, I think if he can figure out pediatric neurosurgery, I think he can figure out housing and urban development. That's just me, though. It's a bureaucracy. That's why you have a good deputy, too. That's why the deputy secretary position, believe me, from all my experience in as I was a 20-something at the Department of Education, Department of Transportation, the DepSec is really important. That's an important job. But Ben Carson has something that we all need more of in government, common sense. And joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us, our old friend, of course, Pete Hoekstra. Congressman Hoekstra has been he's been a leading advocate for Donald Trump, and he's been watching the intrigue and the criticism on the intelligence issues, specifically Taiwan and the Taiwanese call, and whether Donald Trump's going to upend our one China policy and whether that's a big disaster. He joins us now. Congressman Hoekstra, how are you? Great to talk to you.
Hey, good to be with you. Thank you, Laura.
Now, remember back in 2009 when you had all of these foreign policy gurus on the left, and they were praising Barack Obama for being able to turn the page away from Bush, and it was a fresh start and a new approach, and it was hope and it was change. And now apparently Ben Carson isn't good enough for these same people.
Well, Ben Carson isn't good enough, and Donald Trump embracing a friend, Taiwan, a democracy, isn't good enough. And in 2009, we got to remember what Obama's fresh start was. This guy in the campaign said, I'm going to change our relationship with the Muslim world, with the Arab world, and he did. He embraced the Muslim Brotherhood, which has now given us chaos in the Middle East. Donald Trump embraces a friend, and he gets ripped. Barack Obama embraces a deadly threat, and he gets praised. But that's the media. But Donald Trump's doing exactly the right thing. He's sending a clear signal to the Chinese. There's a new sheriff in town. You can't continue hacking millions of Americans' personal data through your cyber attacks. You can't continue to cheat on trade. You can't continue to work with North Korea, so the people on the West Coast now have to worry about a North Korea with a nuclear, we know they have a nuclear weapon, but perhaps the capability to miniaturize it, put it on a missile and hit the West Coast. Donald Trump is just saying, hey, China, it's a new day.
Tell us about the Taiwan Relations Act, which has recognized the independence of Taiwan for decades, and we have a pact with Taiwan that we will respect their sovereignty. That even could potentially require us to intervene militarily if they are attacked. Isn't the message that we're sending at this point to China saying, "Don't you dare"? China is on a road to just, if they want to take Taiwan, it can take Taiwan. No one's going to do anything about it. But I think with Trump, that calculus probably changes with China.
Oh, I think the calculus changes immensely. And remember, everything that I outlined that says that what China's been doing, there's been absolutely no response from the United States. They circled bombers around Taiwan. I think it was the middle of last week. And we now have a president coming into office who says, no, I'm going to respect American law. I'm going to respect our relationship with Taiwan, and I'm going to hold the mainland. I'm going to hold you accountable for your behavior. I've talked with the South Koreans. I've talked with the Japanese. They all recognize that, and the truth is hard. The truth for the liberals is hard to admit that Obama's foreign policy in Asia has been a total failure. And the Koreans and the Japanese, they're looking for a fresh start because they're very concerned about what's happening with China, and they're looking forward to working with an America again that will once again stand for something.
One of the things that we do under the Taiwan Relations Act, which, of course, was initially passed in, I think, April of 1979, is that we provide defensive arms to Taiwan, which, of course, has irritated China to no end for decades. But we believe that an independent and free Taiwan is essential for maintaining the integrity of the shipping lanes there, and also as just of the utmost strategic importance to the United States of America. And I think many of us, really for the last 8 years, have wondered that whether that pivot to Asia was ever going to really take place, and wondered if Taiwan was even going to survive. I mean, it sounds a little inflammatory to say that, but a lot of us were really worried about Taiwan.
Well, there was good reason to be worried about Taiwan, because in other parts of the world, we were abandoning our allies. In the Middle East, we abandoned Mubarak, someone who had basically partnered with us for 30 years. Was it a full democracy in Egypt? No, but we abandoned him and threw him under the bus to the Muslim Brotherhood. We embraced Iran. We threw Gaddafi under the bus, one of our biggest foreign policy successes. We embraced Iran. We embraced Cuba. So, yeah, we had, you had good reason to be worried about what we would do with Taiwan and whether we would stand with Taiwan based on the record of the Obama administration. And, Mr. Trump is saying, no, I will stand by, and I'm going to send a clear signal even before I'm in office that I'm going to, meet the requirements of what the Republican platform said, what I campaigned on, what I'm now doing as president-elect, I'm going to do as president. I'm going to stand by Taiwan.
And I would say that when I hadn't read the Taiwan Relations Act in so long, but going back and reading it about, it is the policy of the United States to preserve and promote extensive, close, and friendly commercial, cultural, and other relations between the people of the United States and the people of Taiwan, as well as the people on the China mainland and other peoples. That's fine. To declare that peace and stability in the area are in the political, security, and economic interest of the United States, and to make clear that the U.S. decision to establish diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China rests upon the expectation that the future of Taiwan will be determined by peaceful means. And then we consider any action against Taiwan that is other than peaceful, including boycotts and embargoes, a threat to the peace and security of the Western Pacific area and of, quote, grave concern to the United States. I mean, this is Trump. Yep. He wants to be peaceful with everybody, but we're not going to be patsies for anybody.
Exactly. We are not going to be patsies. We're going to hold the Chinese accountable. And it's a new day. We're going to hold Iran accountable. We're going to hold Russia accountable. We will establish relations. And people are saying, he's shooting from the hip. He's not getting his intelligence briefings. He's not consulting with the State Department. It's kind of like, no, it's time we drain the swamp at the State Department of the actions and the recommendations that they've put forward for the last number of years. And so, we can rest. I rest comfortably knowing that Donald Trump is getting the advice that he needs from the people who he respects and have a tremendous amount of knowledge, and that he doesn't necessarily have to depend on the people from Foggy Bottom coming to New York to brief him every morning before he has a call with a foreign leader.
Speaking of Foggy Bottom, when I think of Donald Trump's more practical, pragmatic approach toward China, the first name that doesn't pop into my head is John Huntsman. John Huntsman, who's been a very pro-China engagement, globalism, rules kind of guy. I just don't see him at all as someone who would take forward the Trump message on foreign policy or diplomatic approach. I mean, his ability to speak Mandarin notwithstanding, he just does not seem to be the Trump kind of guy. I don't get that.
Well, I don't either. Obviously, if he would select someone like these guys, the expectation would be swallow your own personal agenda, and your job is to implement Donald Trump's agenda. And I would think for some of these folks, based on their previous
pretty hard,
previous work, it'd be very, very hard, and they might be better off just walking away and saying, you know what. I'm glad Mr. Trump won, but Mr. Trump, I really can't implement that agenda.
If you had to rate Romney,
he needs loyalty in that position.
Right, he needs loyalty in that position. Rating between 1 and 10, 1 being the least likely and 10 being the most likely. Where do you put Romney in that? Not who you want, but least likely to get it, most likely. Where do you put Romney?
I put Romney at probably a 7. I think he still has a shot at getting this job.
Well, I said for a long time that if Romney hadn't said those horrible things about Trump, I mean, he's pretty good on China. He's good on China. He was pretty good on immigration, at least when he was running for president. And he was pretty, he kind of looks the part. But he was good on Russia. Yep. But, and where do you put Huntsman? Way down below 5? Where do you put him?
I would put Huntsman below 5, and I would put this would be my personal preference. I don't know. Again, this is all about chemistry with Donald Trump. But John Bolton would be phenomenal.
What if Trump told Bolton, you have to shave the mustache, and then I'll get a haircut, and I'll and I will accept I will think about you more seriously, but the mustache has to go and the hair has to be cut. Do you think that would make it easier for old Bolton to get it?
Bolton would be at the barber shop this afternoon if that were the deal.
That's what I would say. I like John Bolton. People are worried he's too neoconservative. He's going to get us into a bunch of wars. I just don't see that with John Bolton. I really don't. But I like him. I've always liked him.
I don't either.
Congressman Hoekstra, you have a wonderful Christmas with your family. Have a Merry Christmas. Can you give us like 15 seconds of your favorite Christmas tradition as a kid? What you remember and what you loved about Christmas as a kid, beyond just getting gifts. Give us something more wholesome than that.
Oh, my mom was phenomenal. We would do the gifts, but she was so tricky. She'd never put the names on the packages, so we wouldn't know who they were for. And by the time we got to Christmas, she wouldn't know what was in any package anymore either. We had a wonderful family, and my dad was a Dutch baker. In the later part of his life, he would make this stuff in the basement, and my daughters, my 7 and 9-year-old daughters would be baking with him in the basement. Christmas is always a great time for family. So thank you very much, and the same to you and your family and all your listeners. Oh,
God bless you, Congressman Pete Hoekstra. Other people are already are like messaging in about Romney. They don't want Romney. My listeners don't want Romney. I can tell you that, Congressman. They don't want Romney. They're already messaging me. I'm getting tons of messages right now about Romney. He said 7. It can't be 7. Congressman Hoekstra, thank you so much. We'll take a break. Don't go away. Go to Vince on line 2 in New Jersey. Vince, go ahead, my friend.
Good morning. Hi. I wanted to say that, the trade issue, I'm a Republican, or at least I used to call myself a Republican, and even a conservative. And I think we've been lied to by our own side. I was listening to somebody on Fox News who was one of those Weekly Standard people. And they were talking about the dangers of Trump's protectionism and all this anti-trade. Well, when you really start analyzing what's happening, we don't have free trade. Everybody else in the world has free trade. We have this perverted system where they punish our companies with regulations, with taxes, and then they give them a vehicle and make it real easy to go to another country and sell their goods back here. And it really makes no sense other than, what is really going on? You look at the Clintons and all the negotiating they've done with the Clinton.
Right. Well, I think that what we have is a trade war going on, and we're losing it. Now it's time to turn the tide. Use our leverage properly, appropriately, pragmatically. Well, that was candidate Mitt Romney at one of the presidential debates against Barack Obama. And we had Pete Hoekstra on, who's advising Trump on foreign policy matters, former Republican congressman from Michigan, who just said on the show that he thinks it's, he's at about a 7. 1 being the least likely to be named as Secretary of State, 10 being the most likely. Hoekstra said Romney would be at a 7. He said Huntsman is below 5. Huntsman's not going to be the Secretary of State, I can tell you that. But it is interesting. I've been going through the old sound bites of Mitt Romney at the debates in 2012. And so I'm going back and listening and watching what he said on a variety of topics. And he got into, and people don't get all upset about what I'm saying, okay? Don't get all upset. But he went into great detail in the back and forth with, for instance, Rick Perry, who, remember when Rick Perry had that oops moment when he couldn't name the 3 departments he would do away with? Oops. Well, he had a rough go of it after that. And so he was trying to build himself back and try to resurrect himself after that. So there was one moment where we had Perry going head-to-head with Mitt Romney. And Perry was trying to say to Romney, you're a big open borders guy. And maybe we'll have the soundbite and then shortly, but I'll describe it to you. And Mitt Romney said, no. Amnesty is a magnet. It's a magnet, and it allows more people to come into the country and encourages more people to come into the country. And while California and Arizona, he claimed, had not had a net increase in illegal immigration in the previous, I think, 4 years, Texas had had a 60% increase in illegal immigration under Perry's time as governor. Now, I didn't think that was a particularly fair attack on Perry. Perry's pretty good on immigration stuff. We know he is. He's not getting the help from the federal government on enforcing the borders. But Mitt Romney was slamming the idea of amnesty. Now, in the 2007 Bush amnesty, Perry was singing a different tune. He wasn't anti-amnesty back in 2007. So the concern about Romney's evolving views on immigration, I get it, believe me. I understand that. But at the same time, we have to remember Donald Trump on some issues has evolved as well. His political growth has been significant. But I'm always someone who thinks if someone truly is moving in the right direction, shouldn't we encourage that? I mean, that should be encouraged. And I think, in looking back now, I remember this very well because you all remember I supported Romney in 2008, back going in 2008 against McCain because I thought he would have been much better than McCain. And Romney did listen on the China trade stuff. He was pretty good. And he did evolve on amnesty. Well, this is part of the exchange. So this had been Perry was going after Romney on hiring illegal immigrants. He said, I didn't hire an illegal immigrant. Hiring illegal immigrants and the immigration reform question. Let's listen.
I have, in my state, when I was governor, I took the action of empowering our state police to enforce immigration laws. When you were governor, you said, I don't want to build a fence. You put in place a magnet. You talk about magnets. You put in place a magnet to draw illegals into the state, which was giving $100,000 of tuition credit to illegals that come into this country. And then you have states, the big states of illegal immigrants are California and Florida. Over the last 10 years, they've had no increase in illegal immigration. Texas has had 60% increase in illegal immigrants in Texas. If there's someone who has a record as governor with regards to illegal immigration that doesn't stand up to muster, it's you, not me.
Governor Perry, you have 30 seconds.
All right, we don't need to play the entire exchange, but that's one of the reasons, frankly, that Romney won the 2012 nomination, that the grassroots thought he was pretty strong on immigration. The only other person who was, the person who was strong toward the end, blue-collar conservative Rick Santorum. Remember, didn't he win? I think he won 11 states. He was the closest to Romney. So, again, don't be thinking I'm advocating for Romney. I'm not advocating for anyone here. But I'm also trying to get you to remember this. And look, immigration is not going to be, if he's Secretary of State, it's not going to be what he's in charge of. But on that, and we'll go back and play some of the China trade clips. James will get those as well. We have that all in our system, guys, by the way. I played those, over and over again. He's just great on that. But he had terrible judgment in going after Trump. And he had terrible judgment on the 47% comment, Trump is the opposite of the 47%. Trump wants everybody's vote. He doesn't count anyone out. He thinks he can convert everyone to becoming more populist conservative, and he's going to try to do that. Isn't that refreshing? He doesn't write off 47% of the country. He doesn't say that you'll never get those people. He says, I'm going to get as many as I can. Some I won't, but I'm going to try and try and try and try. I'm going to go to Detroit. I hope he goes back to California. Well, he's going to start on the West Coast and move east right before the, inauguration. A lot of people are speculating about yours truly. It's already out there. Otherwise, I can't. Somehow this all got out. But I'm meeting in the afternoon with President-elect Trump. I can hardly even say President-elect Trump. Drew and I always talk about this. It really is kind of hard to believe that this movement really, you guys saved the country. You all who supported Trump saved the country. And we have a chance now to really save the country and grow the country again. It's amazing. Merkel and the burqa ban, Drudge has up. That's a very... Well, Merkel looks pretty good in that burqa. I've got to say, that's a... Oh, what are you saying? That's a pop... That she should wear that all the time? That's awful. I'm joking. I don't think she looks good in the burqa. 855-40-LAURA. So, do you think Romney could redeem himself at this point, given his positions in the past against Donald Trump? Could there be a rapprochement that would allay your concerns about Romney? Is there anything he could do, anything, to allay your concerns? 855-40-LAURA. You all know that I like John Bolton, always have. We have a trade debate coming up. That's going to be good. Kevin Kearns up against Susan Helper. It's going to be fascinating. A lot of people are concerned that Mexico is going to be hurt by a new NAFTA. I'm kind of focused on the United States, but we don't want Mexico to be hurt, but we have to focus on America a little bit more, don't you think? So we'll have a debate about that. The WTO, China, our relationship with China, and I'll remind you all of this. One American-made Maytag washing machine and dryer that I had in my house in Glastonbury, my Rambler with one bathroom with 6 kids, 6 family members, 4 kids, 2 parents. One Maytag washing machine lasted for 42 years. They had some repairs along the way, of course, but 42 years. How many of you have bought one of the new washing machines with the computer chips and all the bing, 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 all the lights and bells and whistles? And that sucker, you're lucky to get 10 years out of it. How many? Now that you add up how much money you spend in replacing the equipment after 10 years. Same with refrigerators. Those Sub-Zero refrigerators are meant to fail after 10 years or 12 years. And you get them fixed, it's like $700 every time you get a Sub-Zero refrigerator fixed. We had a Frigidaire refrigerator, 35 years. So again, every 10 years or 12 years, you have to replace a computer chip, China-made Sub-Zero. Add that up, or pick your whatever type of refrigerator you get. Think about the cost over that amount of time versus you buy one made in America. It'll cost more, but it'll last longer. I think people would buy American, even if a little more expensive, if they know it's going to last longer and keep Americans employed. Would you? Would you spend 25% more on an American-made, better quality, let's say, dishwasher, than buying a Bosch that lasts for 10 years? You have to replace after 10 years. Another $1,200. 855-40-LAURA. We're going to ask that question. Our trade debate coming up, 855-40-LAURA. Remember, on LifeZet, we have a lot of great pieces on LifeZet. The Democrats annihilated their 2020 bench. Is that why old Biden is thinking of running again? God's honest truth, Ingraham. God's honest truth. This old dog still has a lot of fight in his step. We'll take a break. Don't go away. 855-40-LAURA. I was watching a Romney-Obama debate from, I guess it's 2012. I don't know what month. It was with Bob Schieffer. He was the moderator. And it was the third debate, and they were going back and forth on China. It's fascinating. Please get the soundbite, guys. This was fascinating. And it was all about the trade war that would come about if America put tariffs on Chinese goods if we believe that China was distorting the marketplace with subsidies and rampant currency manipulation. So Schieffer says, well, what about a trade war? Very interesting to hear Mitt Romney's response. People forget what Romney said about China. And again, this is all just, we're thinking about the Secretary of State position and all the criticism heaped on Romney. A lot of it, I mean, most of it justified because of his terrible judgment in going after Trump, the way he did so personally. So we'll play that in just a moment. Get the soundbite, guys. Kevin Kearns is president of the U.S. Business and Industry Council. Susan Helper is a professor of economics at Case Western, former chief economist at the U.S. Department of Commerce. We have Wilbur Ross in as the nominee for Commerce Secretary, and both of them join us now about what might be in store for the United States policy on trade. We haven't picked the USTR yet, U.S. Trade Representative, which is a really important job. Susan and Kevin, great to talk to you both. How are you?
Yeah, great, Laura. Thanks for having us on.
Susan there?
Very well, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Great. Susan, let's talk about what's happened to the United States vis-a-vis China since the WTO. When we agreed to have normal permanent trade relation status with China, we agreed to that with a few really important concerns and considerations. And one of them was that China would abide by the normal rules of trade when it came to the anti-dumping provisions, subsidies, currency manipulation. And time and again, of course, we've seen that China has ignored those rules, and it's very expensive to litigate against China in World Trade Tribunal. How would you describe our relationship with China today, given the ever-expanding trade deficit?
Well, it may surprise you, but I actually agree that the relationship with China and the trade with China has had, the way it's been handled, has led to enormous cost to workers. And there's some very good research by MIT professors that suggests that increased competition with China on average has cost communities about $1,000 per working age adult per year in the first decade of the 20th century. So I agree that I think that the way the trade rules have been set up have not been good. I'd also point to a lack of labor rights, a lack of environmental rights, and it really takes competition away from innovation and puts it on who's willing to exploit their workers and the environment more. So I think it has been, we could do a lot better.
But you're concerned about Trump's 35% tariff floated idea?
I am. I think that's a very disruptive way to do it, particularly if we do it, tomorrow or, January 20th, that there are supply chains that are quite interwoven. There are a lot of companies that buy things from China and then add U.S. labor to it. That would be disruptive. So I'd much rather see a kind of rethinking of trade agreements.
What does that mean, rethinking of trade agreements? Just redoing them?
No. I would like to see future trade agreements have very strong protections for labor rights. So the workers should have the right to organize, to be members of unions. I think that getting rid of the special courts for investors is definitely a point of agreement. I think, at least with Peter Navarro, that these investor-state dispute resolution, I think, really tilts the table and away from workers in both countries.
All right, let's get Kevin Kearns in on this. We're going to have a long segment here. Kevin, it's interesting to go back and listen to Romney on trade. In the 2012 debate. He was great on trade, correct?
Absolutely terrific and specifically on China. I mean, there's nothing that Trump has said that Romney didn't say 4 years ago. And, the types of things Susan's talking about are down in the weeds. What we're facing is this economic juggernaut with an industrial policy. And they're not just using or seeking comparative advantage. They're seeking absolute advantage. So they want to knock out industries across the board. The Japanese, the South Koreans, the Taiwanese. I don't know why Trump called Taiwan. I mean, they're a currency manipulator. They're on Treasury's list. They've been taking American jobs for years. So you can go figure on that one. But the problem, Laura, is that we're headed for a crash. We're adding massively to our national debt, borrowing from foreigners to buy their goods. And the question then becomes, how do you stop that, the bigger picture? And it's not labor rights. I have nothing against labor rights, environmental stuff. But, there's this sort of clash of economic philosophies. And we can either have a lot of pain, massive pain later on, or we can do something about it now. Trump's program, the problem with Trump's program, 35% is too high, and it's ad hoc. You need a policy across the board. So whether it's a border-adjustable VAT tax, whether we put in, that's a value-added tax, a tax on consumption, we put that in, we stop taxing producers, we start taxing consumers. There are a number of ways to approach this. But, Trump has kind of settled down and get an across-the-board policy in so that the company that left yesterday is an advantage over the company that wants to try to leave tomorrow.
All right, Kevin, hold that thought. Kevin Kearns and Susan Helper will stay with us. Your calls for them, 855-40-LAURA. Is Trump on the right track with trade, or is it a bit too much? Don't go away. Talking about the trade war, we continue with our guests on this, and this is a complicated topic, and I, for one, am so happy that it's being discussed now. Susan Helper, professor of econ and former chief economist at the U.S. Department of Commerce. She's a professor at Case Western. And Kevin Kearns is the president of the U.S. Business and Industry Council. Has written a lot on this issue, studied it, and so forth. I think a lot of people, we'll continue with Kevin for a moment. Kevin, I think a lot of people forget about Romney's position on China during that 2012 cycle. He was being slammed by the open borders, open markets crowd. But he was, I got to say, with all my complaints about Romney, he was really, in my view, much more nationalistic on trade than a lot of the Republicans who ran against Trump this time, who he ended up defeating.
Yeah, that's true. And there's this, the Secretary of State sort of race or pick is taking shape. People say, well, Romney would be reassuring to foreign capitals. I'd like to see a Secretary of State go to Beijing and Tokyo and Berlin and other places in Northern Europe, East Asia, and say, the days of free riding are over. The days of currency manipulation, no-cost loans, free land, free buildings, VAT taxes, which we haven't discussed, all these impediments to U.S. exports and boosts to your exports to the U.S., they're over. That's what I'd like to see a Secretary of State do, not go in and say, nothing's going to change, we're not going to shake anything up, don't get nervous. We either shake it up now, Laura, or we crash and burn at some point in the not-too-distant future. And if Romney could be enlisted to do that, that'd be terrific, because he has the right trade views.
Professor Helper, to me, when I look at the support that Bernie Sanders had, again, coming at the issue from a different perspective for sure, but the great concern among the vast electorate, the working people, that these trade agreements have been tilted toward the rich and tilted toward Asia, much more favorable terms for both Asia and countries like, of course, now South Korea and Mexico, and that in the end they just haven't panned out the way that we thought. And we go back and look at what Bill Clinton was saying about the WTO with China back in 2000, in the fall of 2000, standing there with the Federal Reserve Chairman Greenspan. Oh my gosh, the promises we were hearing about human rights in China, and it was all going to get better. None of that's, for the most part, happened.
And I think a significant portion of the Democratic Party agrees with you on that. I think one key thing that's important, part of the Sanders approach, is that working people and people around the world actually have a lot in common with each other, and there's a trade policy that would benefit both the U.S. worker and the Mexican worker, and so that we should think about that rather than maybe being quite so nationalistic. That I think that you could imagine a trade agreement that actually lead to more prosperity in Mexico. But as you say, we haven't had those. That the wages in Mexico also haven't risen.
But we don't care. But in the end, I don't mean to jump on you here, Susan, but our president's job is to look out for our country. I mean, we know Mexico, when they signed on to NAFTA, they knew it was going to bring more jobs to Mexico. They need a lot of help. I understand that their currency is way down in the toilet.
And I think the president needs to think about working people in the U.S. and not multinationals in the U.S. So you think about there's still ongoing possibility of a bilateral investment treaty with China, and I think what that does is protect U.S. multinationals. It doesn't. It has all kinds of special rights for investors, et cetera, and doesn't help either Chinese workers or American workers. So I think that would be another way of looking at it, and I think that support for standards shows that that's a significant part of the country agrees with that.
The U.S. merchandise trade deficit with China just in the month of October is $31 billion. Just in the month of October. Now, for people who don't understand that, what that means, Kevin, explain that differential and what that means in practical terms for the United States.
Well, our national wealth, or GDP, or national income, is composed of a couple of components, but trade deficits have been negative for 40 years, or what's called net exports. So we've had trade deficits. And that means we've lost, just in the last 15 years, 70,000 factories, millions of manufacturing jobs, and millions of so-called the multiplier jobs, whether it's the waitress in the cafe outside the plant gate, the dry cleaner, the accountant, whatever. So trade has been a drag on our economy for 40 years.
But what do you say to the people? But what do you say to the people that all your price of things is going to all go up? Your clothes will be more expensive. You bring back clothing, manufacturing. Robots are going to do a lot of these jobs anyway, and people people want stuff for cheap. What do you say to that?
What I say to that is, if we had a national industrial strategy, we would have more money, better jobs in this country, more money circulating in this country. We'd be better off economically. Our national defense would be more secure. Don't forget, a lot of these industries that have been hollowed out affect our national defense capabilities. And, I am going to jump on Susan, even if you didn't want to. It's all this lefty stuff about we have to be concerned about workers all over the world. They have governments. They negotiate the trade deals. If she wants to be chief economist at the Mexican Department of Commerce, fine, go do that. But all this, we have to protect workers worldwide, etc. That's why we're in the situation we're in today. That's why the Democratic Party lost this election.
Susan?
Because the American worker has been screwed over time and time again over the last 40 years.
Susan,
and
your reaction?
National security. We've traded, we've traded off access to Japan bases, etc.
Well, Susan, your reaction, the national security implications, and the working people. Obviously, a lot of the working class people turned out for Trump. The people on the coast, big time, turned out for Hillary. But what of that?
No, I think the question is, okay, so how are we going to get this investment back? And are we going to get this investment by bribing people? I mean, so the carrier, kept a few hundred jobs here, but we gave up $7 million in public money.
1,100 jobs kept here, I believe. But go ahead.
For $7 million. And so that, is every company now going to want that same bribe? I mean, I think the issue is, we can cut taxes, we can cut regulations. That there's no guarantee that leads to any investment. People can just take it and, go have yachts or whatever, whether it be dirtier air, no ability to fish or hunt or whatever.
So you think, I get that, but you think China is abiding by environmental concerns, environmental regulations, and down there in Vietnam, they're doing a great job on that stuff, Susan. I mean, come on.
No, I agree. So
right.
That's what I'm saying is what we need to do is prioritize in our trade agreement that kind of stuff and say, if you don't do something to fight climate change, you can't export here. Or we're going to put a tax on your exports for that reason.
So so you believe in using economic policy to advance a particular agenda on other issues, like whether it's climate change. You think that our trade policy can have those provisions in them, correct?
Yeah, and I would include wages and working conditions. So I don't think. I mean, in contrast to what Kevin said, I don't think it's this lefty agenda that puts Mexican workers first. What I'm saying is, if you really truly put American workers first,
then you want jobs here.
Yeah, I want jobs here. But the way to do that is not more bribing of corporations.
Was Solyndra being bribed? Was the solar industry with Elon Musk, with all the benefits that Musk gets? So, and I don't get me wrong, I love the Tesla, but and I'm for all these different energy sources. But are they being bribed? And what in the billions that they're getting in subsidies?
Clear process. Anybody could apply for that money. It was those people were those companies were chosen by career government employees using clear rules that applied to anybody.
Right. But the companies ended up. A lot of them ended up failures. They ended up huge wastes of taxpayer money.
No. There was one failure, and as you say, as a venture capitalist, if you only have one failure, you're not taking big enough risk. So I think this is actually consistent with Kevin's call for a national industrial policy. That that program actually led to net gains. There was one loss, which was Solyndra, but the others all we have all kinds of jobs in America now in clean energy and other kinds of things because of those programs. So I think it actually fits quite well with Kevin's call for a national industrial policy.
Kevin, your response to that?
Yeah, that's it's part of the puzzle. But I'm not for negotiating a whole bunch of trade agreements. They haven't worked. Essentially what China has done is it has massively overwhelmed both U.S. trade law system and the WTO dispute system. And they are, they're so out of line in so many industries that the trade agreements are predicated on, okay, we're going to get along on 90% of the stuff and 10% of the stuff we're going to have to litigate. Well, that's not the case with China. It's the other way around. 10% of the stuff we're getting along, 90% of the stuff we're going to litigate, and the system isn't set up to handle that. So we need to act unilaterally. Donald Trump is exactly right. His inclinations, are right, that these other countries are taking advantage of us, and I could go on for 20 minutes listing all the props that they provide to their industry and their exporters, and they're looking down the road 20 years and deciding what industries are coming in the future and what they want to be in, and we're saying, oh well, Carrier was it was government interference in the marketplace, blah blah blah, and it's nonsense.
Well, let me remind everybody about the renewable energy. I think in total, and I'm looking at the figures here, Obama authorized $150 billion to be spent on renewable energy that ends up generating energy that provides 1% of total energy consumption to the United States. $150 billion. And he subsidized solar and other renewable energy with taxpayer money to the tune of $39 billion per year on average, and that was the last 5 years. So these are massive subsidies, and they didn't do all that much to increase the contribution of solar power to the electricity generating mix, because solar is, I just produce about 0.6% of our overall energy generation. No, I think this is a debate. We're going to continue with this debate, obviously. This is a big one. We really appreciate both voices. Professor Susan Helper from Case Western, an economist, and an interesting perspective. And, of course, I think in the end we have to have policies that make the lives of the average American better. Kevin Kearns, your writing on this has been really instructive as well. Thank you so much. Kevin Kearns, Susan Helper, here on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Would you pay more for goods made in the United States, especially heavy goods like washing machines, dishwasher, even vehicles, pay more, as much as 25% more, if you knew it was going to last longer and provide American jobs? 855-40-LAURA. Don't go away. I'm asking you. I need 100 of you to step up and give. Perry in Iowa, very quickly, line 2. Perry.
Yeah, Laura, this is Terry from Iowa.
Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, I'm a retired refrigeration technician for Manor Refrigeration, which is Maytag or a Whirlpool now. But I worked in the labs where we tested refrigerators for, like door swings and airflow and all. And I worked on the Sub-Zero.
How long is it supposed to last? How long?
7 years.
They're made to last for 7 years. Did you hear that, my friends? 7 years for a Sub-Zero. You're listening to The Laura Ingraham Show.